All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Give Black, Give Back Conversations. We host this conversation every other month to explore the many facets of Black philanthropy and how philanthropy impacts the Black community. But because it is Black Philanthropy Month, we will be with you every single Thursday at 10:30 a.m. right here on the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee's page. I am your co-host, Kia Jarmon, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-conspirator in philanthropy, Lisa Swift-Young. Let me tell you a little bit about the initiative that Lisa and I have co-founded and serve as philanthropy advisors for. Give Black, Give Back. Yes, the same name as this wonderful conversation we're having is an initiative in collaboration with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. We have a three-pronged mission. We promote and serve and amplify the Black-led funds that are housed at the Community Foundation so that we can advance Black philanthropy in our community. We also support the efforts of nonprofits that are run by and serve the Black community. And we provide access, education, and resources to the community on how to build and sustain philanthropy in order to strengthen our economy. And as I mentioned, this is Black Philanthropy Month. Lisa, do you want to share a little bit more about what Black Philanthropy Month is?
Yeah, welcome everyone back to our month. We are super excited about celebrating. Hopefully you guys are following us on Kia and I individually on our LinkedIn feeds, as well as on the Facebook, and you'll see some information on there. So just to give you guys a little bit of feedback or give you some background, particularly on Black Philanthropy Month, it's actually a global initiative that was founded by Dr. Copeland out in California in 2011. So we are in the 11th year of celebrating Black Philanthropy Month. And so what that means is that this is really a great opportunity for us to recognize and to applaud and sort of amplify the voices of all the Black philanthropists who have ever existed throughout the diaspora, which means it goes back to the continent, all over every place else we hail from. And so Nashville now is recognized as one of those global leaders in Black philanthropy as far as celebrating Black philanthropy. So you can be very proud of the fact that Nashville is now recognized among those illustrious cities around the world who recognize Black Philanthropy Month. So Kia and I wanted to bring this to the Nashville community, recognizing the contributions of African Americans in this city specifically. And since then, we've also recognized people throughout the diaspora in other countries and other places as well. And if you've been following us, you know some of the people that we've had a chance to speak with and talk with, some of the leaders here in the Nashville area. So Black Philanthropy Month is sort of a month that is set aside to sort of kind of hone in on some of the opportunities. So you're going to learn this month a lot about Black philanthropy, about how you can contribute, how your family can leave a legacy, how this thing is, going to continue to be an opportunity for you and your families to really move forward, as far as amplifying Black voices in philanthropy, helping Black-led funds. I always give statistics out. We as African Americans in this country give 11 billion with a B, dollars a year, every year, in charity or philanthropy. And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between what we think charity is and philanthropy is a little bit later. But that's $11 billion. And so this is the thing, we're not asking you to give any more money. So I know everything is tight now, prices are going up, but here's the thing, being more intentional about how you give can really, really make the difference. And that's what Black Philanthropy Month is about. So as you, tune in over the next month and hopefully continue to subscribe, our podcast is coming out pretty soon. So you'll be able to see some old episodes or hear some old episodes as well. I hope that you sort of embrace this opportunity to really learn about how to leave a legacy, and how to recognize the legacy we already have, but how to leave an additional legacy. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So we are joining people from all over the world who are celebrating Black Philanthropy Month. And here in Nashville, as the IT city, we felt it was only proper that we sort of lead this initiative as well. So I'm asking you to let friends know, go in, listen to the replays, do all that kind of fun stuff. but really get behind this and kind of look at Black Philanthropy Month. There is a ton of different things happening, so we want to make sure that you guys are doing it. We've been doing it here for 4 years, so if this is your first year, welcome. And if you've been along for the ride the whole time, thank you so much for supporting this initiative. You can find out more about us through blackgivingback.com. So that is a way to find out about the funds that are here in the Nashville community that are Black-led funds, as well as a way for you to contribute and support as well. And we'll be talking about ways that you can do that over the next 4 weeks. So.
Yeah, I was just about to say that Lisa was doing her good church business, because no matter where you are in the diaspora, we all have some connection to our faith, whether it's physically being in a church location or not. But I was about to do the appeal, but Lisa got it with our website, because it would not be Black Philanthropy Month if we did not make sure that we did an appeal to make sure that that we're able to give intentionally. And so going to that website, blackgivingback.com, gives you a variety of ways in which you can give to us. While this is not for us we're not trying to oversell it. What we're saying is that many of you all already are giving in some way. What we've been able to do is just culminate it all together, put it in one place. You'll find those Black-led funds, you'll find those Black-led nonprofits right there on the website. You also, though, can give to Give Black, Give Back, our fund, so that we can distribute those funds on your behalf. So Lisa mentioned we've been celebrating for 4 years here in the city. We started before, we're pre-pandemic, started before that. Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee came together, brought philanthropists together, and Lisa and I really were both tasked, I would say called to each other to continue this work and really build out this initiative in a way that I just always say supports our ancestors, supports where we come from, and celebrates the labor and the work and the blood, sweat, and tears of those who've come before us. Some of the highlights, because I think it's important that we make sure to take pause and reflect on what we've been able to do over the last several years, and just want to share. So Lisa, jump in whenever you get a moment, but we really came together, as I mentioned, in 2019, and formed this officially, this initiative that we have together. Then from that, the great people, just like you all out in the community, gave money to the Give Black, Give Back Fund, which we had no intention of starting initially, but you all thought it was important that we have a fund, and we're grateful for that. We began solidifying this platform through storytelling. One thing you know about your background, your history, is that we have stories we pass orally over and over and over again. The great challenge with that is that revisionist history would change those stories if we don't document them. So we've been documenting those stories since 2020. So for the past couple of years, really making sure that we cement the stories of Black philanthropy and Black excellence in our community. We've been supporting those nonprofits in our community through technical assistance around discretionary grants, or giving them trainings and tools, promoting them and their organization during initiatives like the Big Payback, which you all know is huge and raises millions of dollars. And we want to make sure we get our share of that $1 million. And as a result of that initiative, or of our work, we made a request of the Community Foundation to designate those Black-led organizations as actually Black-led organizations, so that when you're giving, as Lisa mentioned, you are intentional about your gift. Because Lisa, share a little bit about that statistic, 1 to 3%.
Yep. So when we hear about all this big money coming out, so a lot of times we hear about, like I had somebody the other day say, "Oh, Harry got all this money, and why aren't they doing this, and why aren't they doing that?" And I had to, I took a moment and I said, here's the thing. There's a couple different things. Let me give you a backstory. There is a study that's out, I think in Forbes magazine. I can put it in and post it later on, or follow up with it. There is a history of our HBCUs not getting equitable funding through their preferred states. My son went to North Carolina A&T, so I'll lean into that example. And I've had an opportunity to talk to Chancellor Martin as well, who is an amazing chancellor. So if anyone's interested, other than TSU, I would recommend North Carolina A&T. But I guess the point being is that TSU and North Carolina A&T have been shorted somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion. So here's what happens. it's so like they get this funding in occasionally, but that money is minor compared to what they actually should have gotten. And then when we look at the studies, and this is through the Kellogg Foundation, you can find this in Forbes, you can find, this is all documented information. This is sort of out there for everyone to see. We, on average, when the money is given to these big organizations, African-American led or Black led funds get on average 1 to 3% of what is out there to give. So although these stories come out and they say X amount, Meharry got this amount of money or TSU got this amount of money, not only were they shorted, that's probably the best way I can say it, for over years. So there's no compounding, all that kind of fun stuff that happened, long-term legacy. So we're not talking about even that part. But the fact is, when money comes out, those big dollars show up in our community sometimes, but that's minuscule compared to what happens in other organizations. And we're going to share with you some ways that we can make a difference in that. Like, you have the power to make the difference in that, about highlighting some of these funds and letting people know these organizations who give funds. Sometimes they don't give because they just don't know. Sometimes it's intentional. I'm not going to lie, but sometimes it's because they're not aware. And so you being an advocate out there is a way, we talk about the 5 T's when we talk about philanthropy, specifically time, talent, and treasure. We all kind of know, but your truth and testimony are really a huge piece. And for you to go out there and tell those stories about, give us your stories and give us information is really a way to do that. So we want to get that number up to an equitable share. 1 to 3% is not equitable. And so even when you hear these big dollars coming out, again, forsaking the fact that they have been shorted, and don't have the advantage of compounding interest and money doubling and that type of thing, they are also still not getting so this is why so people would ask, why Black Philanthropy Month? Like, why do we need to have a special month for Black philanthropy? These are some really structural things that have been occurring. And so we are addressing those issues. And so your participation and your engagement in this particular process over this month will start to move the needle closer to where it should be. And so not only do we get equitable shares, I think Kia and I both leave heavy into the equity part. And so that's where 1 to 3% right now, but we are actively engaging to make sure that number is significantly impacted in the short term. So
yeah. So again, Lisa cues me up really well to do another appeal. Okay. As you see, just that little bit of information, often when we share that in corporate spaces, we share that in social spaces, people are often baffled by the $11 billion number, which is only 2/3 of Black households has been measured as 11 billion. So it's actually bigger. Or when we share about the 1 to 3% of the larger funding going towards Black-led organizations or Black people and Black initiatives, just that little bit of learning that we just did is really helpful, but it would be more helpful if you bring us in. And so it's important also to be thinking about how we can come in and educate you, your team, your congregation, and this is for everyone. Because very often we think about, as Lisa was talking about, charity versus philanthropy. A lot of us have some benevolence, some generosity that's in our background, right? We want to give. But charity, if you really think about it, is about keeping people in their condition. And I like to even say, making people feel good about their gift, right? I can drive by and see my name on a building. I can, I have some charity out in the world. If you go to the Tennessee State Museum, I want you to walk to the front door. Before you get there, I want you to see my name and my son's name in one of those bricks. It was important for us to do that, to submit our legacy in writing. That makes me feel good, so yes, it helps them, but it makes me feel really good. But philanthropy really is about supporting people working their way out of their condition, and then giving them the opportunity, the space, so they have tools to be able to become liberated. They can then save themselves, right? And so we really work and focus on that philanthropy piece. And that's the part that I believe, if people knew better, they would do better. If they really knew that what they were doing, while great and helpful in the moment, really was charitable giving, which is what it's designated by the government as, versus philanthropic justice. If they knew better, they would do the justice part of that. Because I want to believe though I'm challenged by this, but I want to believe people want to be better. To be better, you have to make that distinction. And so that kind of leads me, Lisa, into the theme. So the theme
Yep. Yep.
for Black Philanthropy Month, nationally, globally, and here locally in Middle Tennessee, is fierce urgency of now. When you hear fierce urgency of now, how do you interpret that? What do you think about?
I love that sort of, we kind of went into it. So the fierce urgency of now for me means, and first of all, let me back up. I love that quote particular. In my TED Talk, I sort of share that quote about philanthropy. Charity is helping someone in their situation. Philanthropy is helping someone out of a situation. But I would be remiss, as we are honoring our ancestors and those who have led us. Archbishop Desmond Tutu out of South Africa, which we all know was a dear, person to us in the community, and a great ancestor to us, and a great leadership model. His quote is, at some point we got to stop getting people out of the water and go upstream and find out why they keep falling in. And so philanthropy, again, is a way to think about that. It's like, we're so good to, like, we've had a lot of trauma here in the Nashville community, and I would say throughout this country, but in particular Nashville. 2020, we don't even need to say. But also, if you remember, we had a little thing called a tornado. So that was around the same time. So we understand that things need to happen, for people to get food, clothing, and shelter. So that is not what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is the commitment to actually make that happen. And the fierce urgency of now means, while we're now in this respite, I guess, if you will, we're sort of ending out the pandemic, moving through the process of, like, this is going to be every day. This is how we're going to live in whatever way that you manage through the pandemic. We also have to understand that now is the time to prepare and set the foundation. And so the fierce urgency of now, while we're in this space, we understand what it meant to so many of those people who didn't make it through the pandemic for various reasons, because the foundation wasn't set. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the access to funding that we're talking about. There was not enough money in the philanthropic arena for African Americans, for Black-led organizations, to be able to support our brothers and sisters who were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and in this Nashville community by the tornado. And so the fierce urgency of now, to me, speaks to the fact that this is the moment we have. August is a very historic month for African Americans for a lot of different reasons. We'll talk about some of those a little bit later, but there was a lot of pivotal things that happened in the month of August. And if, for those church forum folks who joined me at Mount Zion, you guys know that month 8, or the 8th month, is also a month of new beginnings, right? And so the fierce urgency of now talks about, like, right now is the time we're supposed to be doing this. This is the time that we're making things taken care of. We're getting stuff set up for now, so that our families, so when another pandemic or another tragedy comes, that we're better prepared for that. So for me, the fierce urgency of now, if we've done nothing since 2020 and we don't do anything different, then we can't expect anything different to happen. So the fierce urgency of now is, like, understanding it. Like, we know this is raw. We're still traumatized by it, but we have to understand that this is the moment. This is the moment that we're all here in this space, breathing air, because right now is the time that we're supposed to be here. And the fierce urgency of now, embracing that and making that change, so that George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and, everybody else I can continue to name, that won't be in vain. And so that we can take that momentum and actually make a difference, be the change that we see. And so for me, that's what the fierce urgency of now, like, literally right now is the time that we are on this planet, in this space, to make the difference right now.
Yeah, I appreciate so much of what you were saying. What it calls up for me is that if we don't make the changes now, we will repeat the cycle. Life is very cyclical. So we can point to this exact moment 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago, 400 years ago. We can point to this particular moment, this series of moments. We can point to varieties of time in our history in this country that we have been through the same thing. We've been through famine, we've been through recession, we've been through pandemic, we've been through racism, we've been through legislative upheaval. We've been through all types of things. And we will continue to go through those things if we don't decide how we transition or how we do a course correction.
Mhm.
We get a chance, we talk a lot about kind of individual generational curses or generational changes or things we want to happen in our background, our individual lineage. We've got to think about collective generational curses and collective changes we want to make. And if we don't look at that collective healing, collective issue, collective healing, and then collective liberation, we are going to be here again. And when I think about my young person, my son, who's 8, I don't want him to experience what I've had to experience. And I don't want him to experience what his grandparents or great grandparents have had to experience. So when I think about the fierce urgency of now, it really feels late. Not the topic or the theme, but the actions. Because we know that we're sitting actually in the middle of another pandemic with the widespread of monkeypox. This is about to become overwhelming to our communities. And so we're sitting in the urgency of 10 years ago when we should have known that this was going to happen. Why? Because it's happened before. We went to a conference a few weeks ago, and I was hearing Dr. Forrest Harris, he's the leader of American Baptist College, one of our historically Black colleges here in Nashville. And he was talking about an issue that happened with the former president. And I believe it might have been Lyndon Johnson, but we'll find the information. And when this issue happened up in, I think, New York, around some homicides. And he began to ask questions. He asked a series of questions. How did we get here? And how do we transition out of this? How do we change, or how do we do better? And because we're not willing to ask those questions, we have not somehow figured out how we got here and how we want to do better. We have never answered those questions. We have to at some point ask the question and then be willing to answer it, and then be able to measure, did it actually work? What we said we were going to do, did we actually do it? And so if that doesn't happen, the fierce urgency of now will be the fierce urgency of now 20 years from now. So when I think about that topic, I really just think about how we need to lean into what we talked about, the 5 T's. So I'll just go over them really briefly and pick up where you feel necessary, Lisa. When we talk about philanthropy, we really talk about time, talent, treasure, truth, and testimony. And the reason why this is important, because what we often have been taught is that our treasure, our money, our financial coffers is what all we have to offer. But what we also understand is that that's not always been able, haven't always been able to do that. And there are a variety of reasons why we haven't been able to do that. As a colleague of mine would say, Black people were able to bring philanthropy over on that first and those next series of ships that came from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade passage. It's one of those things that just could not be stolen from us, our ability to give. And so we give of our time. Many of you, if you think about it, you volunteer, you mentor. We have all this language around giving, but you're giving your philanthropic efforts. So I want you to use that language. I'm a philanthropist, I'm a mentor, I'm a philanthropist, I'm a volunteer. Okay, time. So that's our talent. Many of us are utilizing our talents in places that are not even in our workplaces. So you're the accountant at work, but you also go and support the local nonprofit by doing some bookkeeping for them as a volunteer. Again, your talent is showing up for you. Of course, your treasure is your finances, but it's also how you leverage your finances, which we're going to talk about at some point this month as well. It's not just about how much you have in your pocket. It's also about how much you pledge. It's about where you give your tithes and offerings. It's about where you when you feed a young person, when they come to your house and you provided them with dinner that you paid for, those type of things are also a part of your treasure. And then truth and testimony is about how we share. And we've been sharing on this platform for a couple of years, but we've always shared. our stories. We've always made sure that we grab a young person and tell them the story of yesteryear of some sort. And it's not just in telling the testimony, it's also holding a light to that truth, making sure that people don't make another truth. As I mentioned earlier, revisionist history. Elisa, you want to add anything to those 5 T's?
So yeah, so I think, in particular, we do want to make sure you embrace those. And so when we talk about philanthropists, we want to make sure we include everyone's contributions. And I always go back to time, because time is something that you can't make, the time that you have is the time that you have. Time is more valuable than money, as far as I'm concerned. People can argue that, but I feel like time is more important than money. And so the amount of time that you contribute, you are giving of yourself in that way. So consider yourself. And people are like, well, why do I need to be considered as a philanthropist? Because it has power from that standpoint. There is when people, Kia is wearing one of the signature shirts that you can purchase on her website. I'll go ahead and plug that. Philanthropist.
Jarmon.com, yeah.
Jarmon.com. So we'll do that. So it lets people, it's a conversation starter, just like most, shirts are. I'm wearing the Uncle Nearest, I'm making Black history. I think in Tennessee, I think there's a little logo or something on here. So we are intentional about what we're doing. And so when we talk about time and talent and treasure, even these things, when you're talking about, being intentional about how you spend your money, right? So those are things that you can do right now, and that, if an organization is giving back, like blackgivingback.com, you know that this organization is going to be giving back. And so you're intentional about how do you maximize, like, I don't have the time to do it, but I'll set it up this way. Another thing in particular too, Kia, you mentioned earlier, and we talk about legacy, we talk about that testimony. So here's the thing, and someone pitched this question earlier or to someone else, and they were like, my parents and my mom's side of the family has a very illustrious history in the civil rights movement. They were very, very active in the Memphis, Tennessee area. And so there is documentation that they did these things that I can now trace back to it. The question becomes for us right now, what is our testimony going to be to the next generation? What did we do in this time? Because this will be cataloged as a moment, right? 2020, 2022, the COVID-19 pandemic will be something that will be we are making history right now, like literally. So here's the thing. What will be your testimony of what you did differently? Because your children, your grandchildren, will ask, what did you do when all these things were happening? What did you do during the height of the COVID-19 vaccine? What did you do when George Floyd was murdered? What did you do when Breonna, what did you do? And this is a place where the fierce urgency of now goes over that testimony piece. What would be your testimony? And that's a question to ask of yourself. What did you do differently after this period of time in your life that you will be proud to tell? There's some stuff we ain't gonna want to tell. Yeah. But what would you be proud to tell from that standpoint? And here I'm going to say this, and if you want to check it out, Stacey Abrams, which we all know is running for governor. So any of you guys who listen for governor, you know what to do, right? But her point was, going back is not an option. Standing still is not enough. And so moving forward is the only way to do it. Like, that's it. And so how are you going to move forward? And that's what we're going to challenge you with an entire month. And we're going to give you plenty of tools, but you have to reconcile with that legacy. Like, how are you going to, what is this going to mean in the history books? Will you be able to say, I started a fund in the middle of all this process? Will you be able to talk about, to catalog the way that you have personally given back and give your family that legacy of giving? What will be your piece? And so the first fierce urgency of now is literally that, because if you don't do anything right now, as Kia mentioned before, we will be back in the same space, and your children or your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren will be looking at you going, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Right. But that's for you to answer.
Yeah. I mean, that question, how will you move forward, is so simple yet so profound, and it really speaks to our topics that we have coming up for this month. So I'll go through them really quickly. But before I do that, what I will say is the only way to know how to move forward is to understand your history. And so a lot of why we started this conversation space was so that we could document the historical perspective of our community so that we knew how to move forward. And so I encourage you to think one about your own philanthropy origin story. And if you're on Facebook now, share it in the chat with us and I'll shout them out in just a second. But where does your journey of giving come from? Very often, as I'm helping people think about where they started learning, usually it's that 5-cent piece or that dime that you got or that dollar you got from your aunt, your grandparent, your parent to put into the church collection plate. That's usually where it started. But your story could have started in many other places. It could have started with a college scholarship where you realized the value of giving. It could have started with your volunteerism as a young person, like mine did as a Girl Scout. It could have started a number of places. So I encourage you to think about what's your origin, but then also understand the origin of your family. Where has your family given? Where has their time been, their time or their talent been used? As we did our family reunion this year during Juneteenth, and it was here in Nashville, and I had one of our former guests, Bridget Jones, come over. She's a historian, and I had her come over to talk about where my family is from in West Tennessee. So between Stanton, Brownsville, Somerville, Tennessee area. So she was giving some historical perspective, and she was sharing about a time where the government and farmers white farmers were pushing out the Black farmers and Black businesses, and they were living in this like tent city, essentially, in kind of out in a wooded area or out in a fielded area, and they were all living in this community, and people wouldn't sell to them, they wouldn't sell groceries to them, they wouldn't allow them to thrive. And one of my aunts, after Bridget finished sharing the history of our community, one of my aunts, my great aunts, who's of course a child of my great grandfather, great grandmother, said, I remember mommy and daddy taking food to that community. She did not have the full picture until Bridget was able to come in and share about the history of that area and how the Black folks were able to come together and support each other. I'm sharing that to say, when you understand that history, then it makes it so much more, I think, invigorating for you to want to push forward, because you're now taking on the legacy. You're not just standing in by yourself, right? None of us are alone in this world. Even if you are singularly, your own person, you have lineage of people who have pushed you to get to this point. And so for you to push forward, as Abrams is talking about, the only way that's going to work is if you understand that history and understand how it fits into your life. When I know Lisa's story, I understand how it fits into her story, and I understand how will I move forward works. And so I encourage you to be thinking about your history, be thinking about your own origin. And as Lisa said, think about the testimony you're going to share so that you can really share that story with your young person. You can write that today. There's no age limit on writing a new story, right? I always say you can either make a new book, write a new chapter, have a prologue and an epilogue. You can do it all new. Every single day you get the opportunity that you're here, because of course, some of us did not get a chance to be here. I want to move us to, just in the last few minutes, the preview of the month, which is a big part of why we're having this conversation, and around our theme of fierce urgency of now. And so I'm just going to run through the topics, and then we can come in and just hit a few of the points that are going to happen in each one. So of course, this is August 4th. Lisa and I are with you. August the 11th, we have a topic of establishing and maintaining the Black family legacy. We have Jared Strickland, who's a financial services professional at UBS. And then we have Mitra Sharifi, who is a money mindset coach and consultant. August the 18th, We have how to increase organizational giving, diversity in your corporate and social responsibility, or social philanthropy rather. And I know that we're going to have that conversation with Lisa, along with Alfonso Alexander, who's one of our newest advisory board members, and a couple of other guests will be there as well. And then August the 24th, we have Black Women Lead Giving. I think it is appropriate that we begin the conversation with Lisa and I, and end the conversation with a panel of Black women. We have Erica Burnett out of Chattanooga, formerly of Nashville, if you know her. She's with the Chattanooga Women's Fund. We have Jahari Matthews, who is newly cemented over at the Tennessee Titans and working closely with their foundation. And then we have Taisha Wilson with Philanthropy Together out of, I believe Taisha might be out of the Florida area. But they're a national philanthropy organization. Let's kind of briefly touch on what we're going to talk about in each one of those. So August the 11th, establishing and maintaining the Black family legacy. This is what Lisa just talked about. How do we move forward? So we have establishing, because some of us are still needing to establish, that's okay. And then maintaining, what do we do? How do we sustain it going forward? Lisa, this is a huge one for you, this particular conversation. This is kind of how we started in conversation with each other about Black family legacy. Maybe share even a little bit about your own family legacy in terms of the fund that you have.
Yeah, so at the Community Foundation, when you go to blackgivingback.com, you'll be able to see all of the funds that are out there, specifically in different families and organizations who have made the commitment to have a fund that will outlive them as far as a legacy. We are listed as one of those funds, and it's Change We Seek. It is a nod to President Obama, and we are the change we seek. And so our fund specifically is my husband and my 2 adult children. We have a fund that we lead that fund. And so we are a Black family-led fund that our commitment is to give back to the community in a very intentional way. And so that fund was sort of set up in 2018. And so we just decided that was going to be part of our story. We were going to give back in a way that was tangible, in a money gift, and we give back in other ways as far as volunteering as well. And so that was something that, I'm the first one to be able to do that. My parents were able to sort of give us some grounding as far as financial grounding, as far as understanding how financial things work, not money specifically, but the knowledge to be able to how to manage money. And this is the next iteration. And so the understanding is with my children that this will be how the legacy kind of moves forward. It is not very expensive. We'll go into a little bit more information about exactly how to set up a fund, what you can do with a fund, why you want to do something like this. And we'll kind of walk through that process, but establishing and maintaining a Black legacy, if that's in property, if that's in trust, we'll have some conversations around what that looks like and how to money mindset, how to think about money differently. Money is to be leveraged and not necessarily be spent, so we talk about consumerism, which, I get that, but there's a way for us to do that. We got some work to do as far as making up, as I mentioned before, but this is a where you start right now specifically. So that's where on the 11th, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about like how you can do it, what that looks like, how you can set up something like that for your family, or we'll go from there.
Yeah. I mean, part of this is there's what we hope that you experience with us every time we have this conversation is no shame in where you start. As Lisa mentioned, her parents, her family was able to give them tools, give them access to knowledge. And now what she's able to do for her adult children is be able to now say, here is the actual fund that you can now do something with. And what they will then do with that is likely, unlimited amounts of things, right? This is, again, you can purchase real estate, you can start businesses, you can have trust, and we will have those conversations with both of our guests. August 18th, how to increase organizational giving, diversity in your corporate in social philanthropy. We talked a little bit about that today, actually, in just some of the tools in which, one of which is Lisa and I being able to come into your organization and have a conversation with you. But also we have some great experts who will be on the line really talking about how they've done it, how to make sure that you can make the appeal to your employer if you are employed someplace. If you're a leader in an organization, how you can bring this to your staff. So Lisa, any more thoughts about that particular topic?
Yeah, so there's a ton of different things. So, here's the thing. If you are not independently working for, even if you are working for yourself, let me back up. So if you have an organization, you have a family who wants to, really get more information about it, we will be talking about how corporate social responsibility plays into philanthropy and how to make that happen, not only from your business standpoint, but also from your corporation standpoint. There are some really simple things you can do to maximize the giving that you have. In particular, again, going back to that intentional piece that we talked about, like how to be able to do that. I think it's great to give to the office pool and those types of things, but there are some ways that we need to be intentional about it. And there are some matching opportunities. Many organizations have matching opportunities. So if you choose to give to Black Give Back Fund or any of the funds at blackgivingback.com, you will be able to double that in a lot of different cases. So we'll talk about those things specifically. Here's the thing. I speak a little bit or quite a bit on philanthropy and corporations and so corporate social responsibility. And that plays directly into 88%, I think the numbers I use are 88% of people would prefer to work for or deal with a company that gives back. And how is your company leveraging that need to identify and differentiate your company? We can talk about specific things that you can do. You can bring to your organization or bring us in to talk about them that will help to make that happen. And then moving those intentionally to Black-led funds will help us get to, again, going back to what I said, 1% to 3%, we can get that number up very specifically because you'll have that information. So this is a huge conversation. I would encourage everyone, if you run your own business, if you work for a company, if you like, I don't have any more money to give, but I want to double my giving, we will talk about exactly how that happens. So this is definitely a conversation you want to be involved in.
Yeah. And again, every step of the way, we're talking about how will you move forward. And so whether it's your own family legacy, whether it's your organizational legacy, and of course, we end with Black women leading in giving and philanthropy. When we think about the origin stories of many of our major movements, in any movement, civil rights movement, the movement towards better education, the movement towards affordable housing, the movement towards rights people have, their civil rights. I mean, any movement that you can consider in history, you always need to, if you don't see the woman in the forefront, look at the picture and then lean your head to the left and you're going to see a woman standing someplace close by in the background, likely managing some version of what's happening. And in particular, Black women leading those movements, very often in the shadows, often also in the front, but very much so not always being seen or acknowledged or recognized. And it was really important to us to pull together a wonderful panel of folks who can talk about how important it is for Black women to continue to take their right space in the forefront of philanthropy, and the tools and the ways in which we could do that. Lisa and I have talked quite a bit, I think, in one of our last conversations. So if you watch some of the previous ones, you can go to YouTube and see them on the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee's YouTube page. But we've talked a great deal about Black women giving, and now we'll be able to talk to some of those women who are actually doing that. Again, when I look at even corporate social responsibility, when I look at the staffing, I usually see women. I usually see, and it's likely for lots of reasons, but women have always been championing the betterment of people. Lisa, what other thoughts do you have about that topic?
I think, there's some great, there's a great book, and Kia, you have to fill me in on the author again. There's a Madam C.J. Walker in her philanthropy, the book that was, I think you were on a panel recently to have a discussion with the author. So there's some examples that we know about, but I don't think we know that story. And I think he tells the story very, very differently. So I'd encourage you guys to put a link in the book, always about supporting Black philanthropy. So, you can get that book and learn more about Madam C.J. Walker as a example, but there's tons of other opportunities out there. Osceola McCarty down in Mississippi, there's so many women out there who have given, and we want to make sure that we can't be what we don't see, right? So that's sometimes what we will see. And so if we see ourselves as philanthropists and we see ourselves as actually making a change, that is a very powerful way to look at it. Again, going back to charity, our definition is charity is helping someone in their situation, or in some cases, keeping them in their situation, but philanthropy is helping them out of the situation. And that very slight intentional change is what women have always done, trying to make it better for the next generation, trying to make it better for the next sister who's coming along the way, that type of thing. All of our Divine Nine are really around that piece. And so what does that look like? And so, as a Black woman, to be able to own that title as a philanthropist and understanding that you are actually making a change. So your dollar is making a difference. Your time, your talent, your treasure, your truth, your testimony are all valued in that. That will be a great conversation for you to also participate in and engage with and ask those women questions and really get some good information.
So we really want you to tune in. We're glad you're here today. We really want you to tune in to our subsequent dates, though. We also encourage you to stay close to the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee's Facebook page, as well as our website, blackgivingback.com, because we're sharing a variety of stories and things there. As a matter of fact, the newest story that's up on the site is of Lisa and I interviewing Mignon Francois of the Cupcake Collection, which is local to Nashville, but globally known because they ship all across the country and world, the very delicious cupcakes that they have. And so that story is also an example of a Black woman leading in her giving. And so we really encourage you to take a look at our website. It's constantly updated with good information. Lisa, any last thoughts you have before we head out of here?
Oh, so just really quickly, there's a couple of other dates in August. I mentioned to you that August was a very, very important month for Black folks here in this country specifically. So if you didn't know, August the 8th is also Emancipation Day for African Americans. I know we celebrated Juneteenth, where the enslaved people were finally notified that they were free. So that happened for us in the state of Tennessee. For those of you who hail from here or who have family from here, as Kia was mentioning, her family in Stanton, I have family in Stanton as well. That's the day that they were notified. So, recognize that day, pause for that moment, and realize that was a day that your ancestors, if you have ancestral roots here in the Tennessee area, that was the day in the month that they were then recognize that their freedom. And so what does that mean? And so take pause to do that in particular. August 28th. August 28th is a very important day for a lot of different reasons. I think the March on Washington was on the 28th. President Obama was designated for the Democratic on the 28th. There are a ton of things happening. Ava DuVernay has a video or movie, a documentary, if you will, that kind of lays out some different things in particular. So 828 is the name of the documentary, and you can go Google it and find it. I think it's on the OWN network. I think Oprah usually runs it for the month of August. So there's a lot of different reasons to really be proud. We understand in the 1619, that's when we got here. So we're going to go with that in August as well. So there's a ton of different things. So take August as really an opportunity. I know for those of you who are church going folks, y'all know this number, the number 8 against, to restart or new beginnings. Take this as really an opportunity. What is your new beginning going to be? What is this August going to mean to you? And those dates, today's date, thank you for joining us. The 8th, recognizing those who hailed from the state of Tennessee, that was the day that they were emancipated. The 11th, join us for the establishing the Black family legacy. On the 18th, join us for the corporate social responsibility. Definitely come back to us on the 24th to hear those great Black women talk about that. The 28th, if you don't get a chance to watch it before that, make sure you take time to sort of recognize all the things that we've already done, and you can move forward with that sort of power, empowerment from that standpoint. And then be looking out, we're going to be giving out some money this month as well. And so that's part of what we do. We don't, this is about giving money. And so we're being intentional. So be looking out for some nonprofits to be highlighted that we really feel are making a difference again, and moving forward, if you will, and making a difference, not just helping people in their situation, but helping them out of their situation, and recognize those and join us in supporting them financially if that's the thing you want to do. But again, we gave you 5 T's that you can go after. So, we do that as well. So be looking for those things. Lots of different pieces that are coming. Check out the piece on Mignon. We want to thank, in the background right now, are 2 really great people who are working to make this all happen at the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Audra Cox, we could literally not do this without her. And so she is our liaison there at the Community Foundation. Kia and I work in other opportunities. Again, we come out and we speak to people. We have different career paths as well that tie into that. And then Kelly Warburg, who is the VP of Communications at the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. We want to recognize their contribution, and everyone at the Community Foundation for allowing us to take over for the month of August, their platform to really highlight Black Philanthropy Month. Thank you so much, Kia. I'll let you close it out, but I want to thank you guys for taking the time to learn. But the fierce urgency of now is literally the time to do it. This is the opportunity that we have to really make the difference. And remember, think about what you want your story to be. What do you want to do? And how will you talk about that to your family?
Absolutely. I want to shout out one more date. The month of August is also Black August. And this was shared with me by a colleague of mine who spent a great amount of time in prison. This is a annual commemoration and prison celebration, really around making sure that Black freedom and Black liberation happens, because what we know is that many of our incarcerated brothers and sisters are not necessarily there for their own crimes, or they're there on overinflated charges. And so Black August is the time to really highlight that Black resistance, particularly around racial oppression. So I want to share that because all of us, none of us grow unless all of us grow. Okay, and that's really important. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that. With that being said, go to our website, blackgivingback.com, as Lisa has mentioned, and give to those funds. You can give also to the Give Black Give Back Fund if you don't know where to give, and we're happy to distribute that money for you and on your behalf. We also take large checks as well, so if you don't want to give through the website, you can contact Audra. Her information is on the website. Audra Cox is at the very bottom, and she will be happy to arrange us all meeting to get a very large check from you. So I'm going to speak that into existence.
Yes.
Until next time, we look forward to seeing you. We'll see you next Thursday, August the 11th, right here, same place, same time. Please share with your friends. Please make sure that people know that we're going to be live next week with Jared Strickland and Mitra Sharifi. All right, we'll see you next time, and make sure to give Black.